How's it going, everybody? My name is Mitch and welcome to the channel. Today's going to be kind of a different type of video. I'm going to try to put them out every Friday. I made a previous video called Welcome to Fun Friday, and I think Fridays are just going to be days where I post any kind of random video I want to make. Not necessarily a tutorial video, the kind of videos I usually make, but this is going to be just anything random. And today we're going to be talking about something I kind of been telling myself and something I think others need to hear. And that is the topic of today, the title of this video. Your art is good enough for Webtoon. Really, what this means is my art's good enough, your art's good enough, pretty much anyone's art is good enough. And there's a couple reasons I say that. Well, before I go off on my tangent, I'll just say in the background I'm drawing a thumbnail or a logo for an upcoming comic of mine that I plan on posting on Webtoon. If you are in the new year 2021, it should be out. Link will be in the description down below. But if you're watching this in the first couple weeks of this video, it's still not out. I'm working on it. But yeah, back to the topic before I go off on another tangent. Your art is good enough for Webtoon, and there's two meanings for what I mean by that. The obvious one is you kind of just need to make a comic, because art is probably about the third most important thing when making comics, which seems crazy. And it's I'm kind of realizing this as I'm making comics. Art definitely can carry your comic, and it can definitely make a comic great, I believe. That's pretty obvious. But there are two more things that I think are definitely more important, and you could have a comic with bad art but be really good. And one is obviously writing. I think that should be obvious. If you have a really well-written comic that has really good dialogue, really good plot, just everything in the comic, and the art is not great, it can still be a pretty decent comic. I mean, look at One Punch Man and Mob Psycho. I mean, those comics are pretty good, and the art's less to be desired. I mean, they fixed it with making Yusuke Murata, or I can't remember what his name was, to revamp the art for One Punch Man. But yeah, Mob Psycho it's still a pretty decent comic. I would recommend anyone reading it after watching the anime. But yeah, it's just well written and well paced. And number two, I would think, which is actually more important than art, is like the readability of your comic. And what I mean by that is it's definitely something that I've been learning more and more about, and it's kind of just how your comic flows and how it reads, because a lot of people still don't really know what that means, myself included. And I mean more of like, how big is your text, how well paced are your panels, I mean how spread apart are they, and what you kind of need to and just the overall readability of your comic. I think that's very important. Again, you really don't need to have good enough art, but if all of your fonts and all of your placings and a lot of your effects are good, it can kind of make your art look a lot better and make it so you're not really paying attention to it. I mean, because really, if you think about it, I mean, most of the panels, your audience is going to be looking at it for a couple seconds. So if your art really isn't that great, that's something to think about. So yeah, that's why I say your art is good enough, because the two things you do need to learn other than getting better at art is learning how to write a story, and the best way to do that is just write a story and make it a comic. And then to improve the readability of your comic, you just got to make comics. There's really no other way to do it. I mean, you can study, but making comics is definitely going to be the best way too. And so, two birds, one stone kind of. And, doing that also improves your art. So really just making a comic as soon as you can, even if you're drawing stick figures, it might be a good idea to start a comic. And I kind of wish I would have gotten that advice early, because I really haven't made that many comics. And, when I'm trying to make a comic, I'm running into these issues where I don't really know how it'll read and how it'll flow. And just, there's a lot of other stuff other than the art that actually goes into making a comic. And if your main goal is to make a decent comic, which mine is, you really need to get on the ball just as much as you do learning how to draw. So that's the main reason, and that's kind of me telling myself that as I draw panels and I'm just not very satisfied with how they look. So I just need to tell myself it's more about making it and learning the different aspects of making the comic that I need to learn. And I'll probably talk about this in another video. My comic I'm coming out with 100 years later. That's the title, not I'm coming out with it 100 years later. I'm thinking of it as like a practice comic, which probably isn't good. And I probably should just make my big idea comic, which other people say you shouldn't do. But yeah, it's kind of each their own, I guess, for that. But yeah, I'm making the comic to sort of learn how to do all those things, how to write a better story, how to write better dialogue, how to pace my comic, how to, put it all together. And, I think art is kind of third. It's kind of weird. Hopefully my art will grow by, having to draw pretty much every other day or every day. But kind of learning how to make the comic is definitely coming first. So that's definitely the main reason on why you should be making a comic and why your art is good enough for the comic. And that's not really necessarily for making it popular. It's more for like yourself and why you should be making the comic and why you should tell yourself your art is good enough. So the second point is going to be more of why your art's probably good enough on an artistic standpoint. I don't want to I'm not going to name any comics in particular. Well, other than Mob Psycho. Some comics are good and they have bad art, and that's just how it is. And if you can kind of make a style and make it, if you kind of fix your backgrounds and the aesthetic all to your same style, it might look really good, actually. I've seen a lot of comics on Webtoons that I honestly think my art skills are a lot better than them. But they kind of just make it work, and it kind of works really well for the comic. And art, honestly, is pretty subjective. A lot of people, myself included, might be, watching this speed paint and think, it's not that good. But, other people might be like, oh, that's pretty decent. And I appreciate that. But, I don't really think that. And, a lot of artists are, their worst critics for sure. But yeah, you might be drawing something and you're staring at it and you're just thinking, yeah, no, this is not great. I'm gonna have to study for years before I can even think about making a comic. But no, you really you need to put it out there. Some people might love your art and just be like, wow, I think it's great, keep it up. And you might need that. And, hopefully that happens to me, but wishful thinking maybe. But yeah, that's really the second point to that, and definitely a more artistic standpoint is, art's very subjective, and it can really, honestly, if you make your stick figures look decent, it could look pretty decent, to be honest. I've seen a couple things where, oh man, this guy made a animated version of stick figures fighting. And everyone's seen it, but I can't remember which one it was in particular. It looked so well because the production value was just so incredible. And there you go. I mean, that proves you really don't even have to have good art to make a comic. And also, on this channel, I've posted videos how you can import Vroid models into Clip Studio and kind of trace them. So really, there's no excuse to not even have that level of art in your comic, because really you don't have to have any art skills at all to do that. And if you're not familiar, I'm not saying trace over other people's artworks. Don't do that. That's obviously not what I'm saying. That's bad. Don't do it. I don't. It seems weird I have to say that. But what I'm talking about is kind of creating your own 3D model with Vroid. That's a program where you can create a 3D model, and then you have the legal rights to it. And then you can you don't even have to trace over. You could just plop it into a Clip Studio and call it a day, and that would probably look decent. More than stick figures. But I guess that's going off topic. So to kind of sum up what I'm trying to say is make a comic. If your main goal is to make a comic, as mine is, start doing it. Stop slacking. If you needed a sign or you need someone to tell you to do it, I'm telling you to do it. I wish I would have started earlier, because I've been drawing I started drawing when I was like 19 or 20, and a lot later than most people. But I'm getting a lot older now. I'm getting about 20. I'm about to turn 27 next year. So I've been drawing, for about almost 7 years now, 7 or 8 years. So I kind of wish I would have tried to make my own comic, a couple years after I started drawing, because I really started drawing just to make comics. And it's kind of weird that I've finally gotten to a point where I'm going to be actually making a comic, and I feel like I'm definitely late, but it's better to start now. Obviously, I'm not going to look back on it and be like, wow, I really should have started, and self-wallow. But I do kick myself in the butt every now and then, because thinking about that. So if you're a lot younger, or age really doesn't matter, but just start, and you'll definitely appreciate you starting earlier. So that's pretty much all I have for this video. It was definitely rambly. I've never really made a video kind of like this, so it was probably a little rough. If you watched this far, I appreciate it. Make sure to comment down below what you think about this topic. If you think your art is good enough. Because honestly, this year I was kind of thinking I'm not gonna make a comic. I just want to improve my art skills. And it's kind of been like that every year since I've been drawing. And it's kind of getting to the point where I just need to make a comic, because there's a lot of other stuff, storytelling and pacing and just a lot of other stuff that goes into making comic other than art, that I kind of need to learn how to do. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're in the new year or beyond, feel free to check out my comic 100 Years Later and any of my other stuff in the description down below. Thanks for watching.